You wake up to another message on your phone. She asks you for a favor. Maybe it is something small, like driving across town to help her with something she could easily do herself. Maybe it is something bigger, like rearranging your entire evening to accommodate her change of plans. You hesitate for a second, but then your finger types yes before your mind even catches up. You tell yourself you are being kind, generous, supportive, but when the screen goes dark, you feel a hollowness in your chest. Hours later, after you have done what she asked, there is no gratitude. In fact, there is less warmth than before, as if your compliance has made you smaller in her eyes. That moment of silent disappointment is familiar to you, because it is the same each time you bend, each time you give, each time you surrender your center in the hope of affection. What you do not realize yet is that she does not respect the man who cannot say no. And without respect, desire evaporates, leaving you bound to her requests, but excluded from her true admiration. It is in this painful tension that the ancient Stoics left their warning, their hard-won revelation. If you cannot master yourself, if you cannot draw the line that says, "This is mine, this is who I am, this I will not give," then you will be ruled by every impulse and by every demand others place upon you. The Stoic principle is simple, almost brutal. Respect does not come from saying yes. It comes from having the strength to say no and to bear the consequences. The promise hidden within their words is not merely to gain her admiration. It is to become unshakable, to live in such a way that your worth is never dependent on her approval, because it radiates from the fortress of your character. To live this way is to step into a higher order of being, where your choices no longer come from weakness, but from sovereignty. At the heart of Stoicism lies one great principle that transforms everything once you see it clearly: the distinction between what is within your control and what is not. For Epictetus, the slave who became a philosopher, this truth was liberation. His body could be chained, his life dictated by a master, but his will, his judgment, his ability to say yes or no to what entered his soul, this was untouched. He taught that all suffering begins when we confuse the two realms, when we think we can control another's love, another's approval, another's desire. To live as though you can make her want you by giving more and more of yourself is to step into slavery, for her reactions are not yours to govern, but to stand in the clarity of what is yours, your words, your boundaries, your decisions. That is the seed of freedom. Saying no becomes the act that separates the man who is owned by his hunger from the man who owns himself. This principle does not excuse you from loss, from pain, from rejection. In fact, the Stoics are merciless in reminding us that these are inevitable. The woman may be angry when you refuse. She may withdraw her affection. She may even leave. But the deeper truth is that respect only grows where boundaries are enforced. A man who says yes to everything teaches her that his yes has no weight, and soon his presence becomes a background noise rather than a force. A man who can say no, who can hold his ground calmly without rage or apology, teaches that his yes is real, his presence substantial, his essence undeniable. In this, the Stoics hand you a key, but whether you will turn it depends on whether you can endure the discomfort of being misunderstood. To understand this, you must step further into their vision of life, where virtue is the only good, and every other thing, money, status, affection, even love itself, belongs to the realm of the external, the realm you do not truly command. Once you let this sink in, the sting of her displeasure weakens. For if her anger, her withdrawal, her coldness is beyond your control, then to give up your integrity to prevent it is to bargain with shadows. In truth, what she longs for, even if she cannot say it, is a man who stands rooted in himself, who offers love not from fear of losing it, but from the abundance of his unshakable character. To say no, then, is not rejection. It is the affirmation of self, the reminder that you belong first to yourself. This is the threshold upon which respect is born, and through respect, desire can live. The Stoics understood something most men ignore until it is too late. The human heart does not naturally admire what is endlessly available. The psychology of desire, especially within the feminine, responds not to the one who gives everything, but to the one who withholds with purpose. This is not cruelty, but a reflection of the way human nature is wired. To the Stoics, the highest good was virtue, the internal mastery of the self. For the feminine, respect is a mirror of that virtue. A woman will test your limits not because she consciously seeks to dominate you, but because she instinctively seeks to know whether you are a man who governs himself or a man who can be governed by her whims. When you always say yes, when you comply without question, you communicate that your center is fragile, that her shifting emotions dictate your identity. She may smile when you agree, but deep within, her trust in you erodes. When you calmly say no, not with bitterness or anger, but with the steady composure of a man who knows what is his to command, something different awakens in her. She feels the edge of a boundary that cannot be crossed, and though she may resist it in the moment, her deeper nature recognizes it as strength. This is where Stoicism aligns so directly with the battlefield of modern relationships. The principle of control and non-control is not a sterile philosophy. It is a map for desire itself. The more you try to control her feelings, the more you lose her respect. The more you control only yourself, the more she feels drawn into the orbit of your certainty. Consider Epictetus again, the philosopher born a slave. He lived under the authority of another man's will. His body was beaten, his freedom denied, his very name marked him as property. Yet from that crucible of powerlessness, he discovered the only form of sovereignty no chains could reach. When his master twisted his leg, Epictetus is said to have calmly remarked, "If you continue, you will break it." When the bone snapped, he did not curse or cry, but simply said, "I told you so." This is not indifference, but radical clarity. His master controlled his body, but not his judgment, not his inner response. In that moment, he embodied the essence of Stoicism. A man who cannot be forced to surrender his mind cannot truly be enslaved. When you are tempted to bend endlessly to her requests, recall Epictetus. You fear her anger, you fear her distance, but what is truly yours to command? Not her moods, not her approval, not her desire. What is yours is your word, your action, your no. When you speak it, you step into the same sovereignty that made a beaten slave into a teacher of emperors. It is here that the Stoic wisdom pierces through the illusions of romance. Most men imagine that love is nourished by endless giving, that affection is purchased with sacrifice, that compliance ensures closeness. But the Stoics teach that nothing external guarantees peace. The one who chases affection by surrendering his own center becomes like a man trying to cup water in his hands, while the tighter he grasps, the faster it leaks away. To say no is to open your hands and stand firm, knowing that what is meant to remain will remain, and what is not was never yours. Women, in their own psychology, sense this difference. They may not articulate it in words, but they feel it in the marrow of their desire. A man who lacks boundaries is safe but dull, kind but forgettable. A man who holds his ground is dangerous in the most vital sense. He cannot be consumed. It is in this danger, this edge, that respect grows, and with respect, attraction takes root. Yet this is not merely strategy. The Stoics did not teach games, but transformation. To practice the art of saying no is not to manipulate her feelings, but to refine your soul. It is to become the kind of man whose value does not depend on external approval, whose worth is forged in the fire of discipline and clarity. Women will test you, life will test you, but each no spoken with calm strength is a declaration that you belong to yourself first. And from this center, every yes you give becomes a gift rather than a surrender, and every boundary you draw becomes the soil from which her admiration grows. You stand at the edge of a paradox, that has tormented men for centuries. The more desperately you try to hold on to her, the more she slips away. The Stoics give you a lens to understand this paradox, and Marcus Aurelius himself, emperor of Rome yet a student of humility, lived inside it. He was the most powerful man in the known world, armies at his command, wealth beyond imagining. Yet his writings and the meditations reveal a man constantly reminding himself of the limits of control. He wrote that you cannot control what others think or feel, only your own mind and actions. Imagine that the man who could command the legions of Rome knew he could not command the heart of another. This insight burns away the illusion men still carry today. You think you can secure her respect by giving, by pleading, by molding yourself to fit her desires. But in truth, the moment you try to hold her through control, you lose the only ground that is yours. Respect comes not from the ability to hold on, but from the willingness to let go. This is the hidden power of saying no. It is not aggression, not rebellion, but the courage to lose. Most men cannot do this because their identity is tied to her approval. When she threatens to withdraw affection, they panic, they submit, they hand over pieces of themselves in exchange for the illusion of closeness. Yet Marcus, who buried children and endured betrayal, teaches that loss is inevitable. If you can accept this, if you can bear the grief without surrendering your virtue, then you are free. Women sense this freedom. A man who can lose without collapsing is a man they cannot rule, and that is the man they respect. It is not cruelty they admire, but the unflinching strength that says, if you leave, I will endure. If you stay, I will remain myself. Consider how desire itself is shaped by boundaries. Fire without a hearth consumes everything and burns out. Fire contained within stone walls warms, illuminates, sustains. So it is with love. Endless indulgence, endless compliance, is like fire spilling without limit, destructive, unsustainable. But a boundary, a firm no, becomes the hearth that makes passion possible. Without it, she cannot trust you, for trust is built not on your obedience, but on your immovability. Her nature, often unconscious, is to press against your edges. Each request, each test, is not simply about the task at hand, but about discovering whether you are a man she can lean on. If every wall falls with the slightest touch, she knows she cannot rest in you. But if the wall holds, even when she pounds against it, a strange calm fills her. She has found a strength greater than her own storms. This is why the Stoics are ruthless about detachment. To live for externals, for affection, for status, is to live in chains. They remind you that life itself will strip these from you. Death will take her or take you. Fortune will turn. Beauty will fade. Youth will vanish. If your worth depends on these, you are doomed. But if your worth is rooted in virtue and self-mastery, then no loss can touch it. Women, though they may rage against your refusals, secretly crave this strength. They are drawn not to the man who fears loss, but to the man who embodies what Marcus wrote. Do not act as if you are going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. To be good here is not to be compliant, but to live with clarity, with courage, with unshakable virtue. So when you say no, you are not simply denying her a request. You are announcing that your life is not ruled by fear of loss. You are stepping into the ancient truth that everything external is fleeting, and only the mastery of the self endures. In that moment, even if she scorns you, even if she walks away, you have won something greater than her approval. You have won your freedom. And paradoxically, it is often in that freedom, in that willingness to let go, that she finds herself most bound to you. For respect cannot grow where fear rules, but only where sovereignty reigns. Seneca's life delivers the most haunting example of the Stoic principle. He was tutor and advisor to Nero, a young emperor whose cruelty grew monstrous. Seneca, once the most celebrated philosopher in Rome, was drawn into the dark games of imperial politics, and though he tried to guide Nero toward wisdom, he could not control the descent into tyranny. Eventually, he was accused of conspiracy and commanded to take his own life. Here is where the lesson emerges in its rawest form. Imagine the scene. Soldiers surround his villa, his wife weeping, his friends pleading, and Nero's order in his hands. Most men would beg, resist, collapse in despair. Seneca did none of this. He accepted calmly what he could not change. He bathed, opened his veins, and spoke words of consolation to his loved ones as the blood drained from his body. His final act was not a defeat, but a triumph. He could not control Nero's will, but he could control his own response, his own dignity, his refusal to let fear or panic govern his last moments. This is the essence of the Stoic no. It is not merely a refusal of another's request. It is the refusal to surrender your soul to fear, to manipulation, to weakness. It is the decision to meet whatever comes with composure, to say, "You may command my body, my fortune, my circumstances, but my judgment is mine." Seneca's death teaches that even in the most powerless situation, the core of the self remains inviolable. And this is precisely the core that women instinctively seek in a man. Not wealth, not flattery, not endless yeses, but the silent force of a man who cannot be bent against his nature. Think of how this plays out in the daily theater of relationships. She asks you to abandon your principles for her convenience. She tests your patience with demands that contradict your values. In these moments, your no is not cruelty. It is the hearthstone of trust. When you yield every time, you teach her that you will betray yourself to keep her. How can she respect that? If you will not even remain loyal to yourself, how can she trust you to remain loyal to her? But when you calmly refuse, when you bear her disappointment without retreat, you reveal that same dignity Seneca showed in his final hour. You are saying, "My integrity is worth more than your approval." And this paradoxically draws her nearer, because beneath her resistance, what she truly craves is the assurance that she is with a man who will not collapse. The Stoics were often accused of coldness, but in truth, they burned with a higher fire. They loved deeply, but they loved from strength, not from fear. To love from strength is to give freely, to say yes when it springs from your soul, not from your terror of rejection. This kind of yes is rare, and therefore precious. To say no is to protect the possibility of a real yes. Seneca's writings often return to this point. Life is short. Time is the only true wealth, and to waste it in pleasing others at the cost of your own essence is the greatest poverty. In relationships, this becomes a brutal truth. Each yes spoken from weakness impoverishes you. Each no spoken from strength enriches you. And the woman beside you, though she may not voice it, feels the difference. In the end, Seneca's death was not a tragedy, but a completion of his philosophy. He had spent his life writing that fortune, love, and even life itself were not ours to keep. When the moment came, he embodied his words. You, too, face your small deaths each day. The death of comfort when you refuse her unreasonable demand. The death of peace when you endure her anger. The death of illusion when you stand firm and watch her reaction. But each of these is a victory if you remain whole. Each no spoken with dignity is a refusal to let your soul be conquered. And each refusal plants the seed of the respect that cannot be faked, the respect that draws her eyes to you, not as a servant, but as a man. Every man who walks this earth will face the same dilemma, whether to live bent under the weight of others' expectations, or to stand upright in the clarity of his own soul. The Stoics insist that this is not a choice made once, but every day, in small moments that decide the shape of your destiny. When she asks for what you cannot give, when the world demands what would betray your nature, when your own fears whisper that surrender will keep you safe in those moments, you are standing before the same choice Marcus Epictetus and Seneca faced. To say yes when you mean no is to die a little death of the spirit. To say no with calm strength is to be reborn into freedom. What you must see is that the art of saying no is not a trick to manipulate her, not a technique to spark attraction. It is a discipline of the soul. It is the Stoic sword that cuts through illusion. For women are not the only ones who test you. Life itself will press against you. Fortune will betray you. Desire will pull at you. Fear will whisper in your ear. To train yourself to say no is to forge the steel needed to meet all of life's trials. When you learn to bear her displeasure without trembling, you are also learning to bear loss, rejection, failure, and even death. This is why the Stoics teach that virtue is the only good. Every other thing can be taken, but virtue is yours alone. Imagine the transformation. You enter a room no longer desperate for approval, no longer bending at every frown or rising at every smile. You move with calm. You speak with clarity. You grant your yes as a gift and your no as a truth. Women feel this difference immediately. They may push, they may resist, but beneath it, their respect grows. For you are no longer a man begging to be chosen. You are a man who chooses himself. And from this self-choice radiates a magnetic power. It is not arrogance, for you do not seek to dominate her. It is not coldness, for you are still capable of love. It is sovereignty, the condition of one who belongs fully to himself. This is what the Stoics promise, that by mastering the art of refusal, you step into a freedom no one can take. But do not mistake this path for ease. To say no will cost you. You will lose opportunities, comforts, and perhaps women who cannot bear the weight of a man who cannot be bent. You will be misunderstood, accused of being harsh, stubborn, unyielding. Yet the Stoics remind you that truth is not measured by applause, but by endurance. The price of respect is the willingness to stand alone when necessary. And paradoxically, it is in that aloneness, in that readiness to lose, that you become most desirable. For the feminine longs not for the man who will dissolve into her, but for the man who will remain himself even when all else crumbles. So here stands the final warning. If you cannot say no, you will never be respected. You will live as a slave to moods, to demands, to fears, and in the end, you will lose not only her admiration, but your own soul. If you learn to say no, if you learn to draw the line with calm dignity, you may lose her favor for a time, you may endure her anger, but you will gain something eternal, the knowledge that you belong first to yourself. That is the essence of Stoicism, and the essence of manhood. The choice is before you, to live in chains of endless yeses, or to walk in the dangerous freedom of no. One path leads to comfort and slow decay, the other to hardship and unshakable strength. She will know the difference. You will know the difference. The world will know the difference. The Stoics leave you with no compromise. To be a man is to master the art of refusal, to wield no as a sword that protects the only thing that was ever truly yours, your soul. And so the question remains, when the next request comes, when the next test arrives, when her eyes search yours for weakness, will you say yes to fear, or will you say no and step into the freedom of respect?